Hello all, electronics engineers do need to have a grip on the polarity identification of the components, whether it be a circuit design engineer, a test engineer. One need to know and identify the component polarity so that they don't commit mistakes in the design. While identifying a component looks very simple, sometimes it's tricky based on how the markings are made for different components based on their polarities. Now, let us start with a very simple one which everyone knows, a diode, a simple PN junction diode. So, if you see a simple PN junction diode, this is a component where the marking on a diode, this is the marking that you see here. The marking on the diode is always towards the cathode side. So if you take a diode into your hand and if you are trying to identify which is positive negative, just look for a marking on the diode. The second component is capacitor. This is a tantalum capacitor that we are seeing. Now, why we kept this particular part immediately after diode is, if you see this capacitor, this is a polarized capacitor. This is a tantalum capacitor, which is a polarized capacitor. That means you have to connect the positive of plate of that capacitor to the positive and negative to the negative. So in your circuit, connecting it is very important. Now on this tantalum capacitor, the marking that you see here, okay, is anode marking. This is clumsy, right? Now if you have a diode and a tantalum capacitor nearby, 100% most of the engineers do get confused instantly when they look at it. They might know, but again they just want to ensure or double check, are we reading it correctly. So tantalum capacitor marking, remember that the marking that is there is anode, whereas in the diode we have seen that it is towards cathode. And going to the next component, the electrolytic capacitors. Electrolytic capacitors are very easy to understand. We are talking about the through hole electrolytic capacitors here. You have a negative marking straight away, and also based on the leads you can identify. The shorter lead is towards is the negative, and the longer lead is the positive. So it is better we identify by the marking on the body rather than leads, because sometimes you cut the leads and you are clueless what happens. So always try to remember based on the marking, and it's very easy. Negative is directly identified here. So identifying an electrolytic through hole capacitor is very easy. And this is another tantalum capacitor. Now you see here, this also is very easy to understand or read the polarity. The plus is nothing but the positive lead, and the other one is the negative lead. This is very straightforward. And this is the SMD electrolytic capacitor. Again, this is little bit tricky. Now, if you just go back 2 slides, okay, here we have said that in the tantalum capacitor, the marking represents the anode, right? But if you go to a SMD electrolytic capacitor, this the marking that is there, kind of a half moon kind of representation with a black one, represents the negative polarity. So in capacitor, again the markings are little different for tantalum and electrolytic, which is again little confusing. So if you have diode in hand, a diode in mind, or if you have a tantalum in mind, again bringing in electrolytic confuses you, right? So remember that the marking on SMD electrolytic capacitor is towards the negative side. And this is an axial capacitor. So axial capacitor is very easy to identify. The marking around that capacitor is towards the negative side and you have plus on the other side. This is straightforward. And then here comes the most favorite component for us, the LED. And this we are talking about a through-hole LED. LED belongs to the family of the diode, right? So the marking, whichever is present as in diodes, will be towards the cathode side. So now if you see here, if you see the flat line that is represented, or inside if you see the larger part is a cathode part. While you cannot identify by this is the easiest thing to identify. So you can see the flat is being represented here. The other way also to identify this particular part is by the length of the leads. So the cathode lead is smaller than the anode lead. And again, if you cut the leads, it is difficult to identify. So it is important we identify by the flat part. So this is cathode. So identifying through hole LED is not so difficult, right? Again, identifying diode is not so difficult. And then here comes the SMD LED. SMD LED is available in different form factors with the different manufacturers. Okay, so one might say 0402, 0603, 0805 LEDs, but it's not just those parts. There are many LEDs that are used in different designs apart from these footprints. So identifying the polarity of the SMD LEDs is important. Again, the simplest thing, in diodes, the marking is towards the cathode. Like for example, if you see the top diode, okay, you can see there is a green color mark that is present. Okay, so this is called the polarity mark. As we are saying, the polarity marking in diodes is towards the cathode. It is straightforward that this is a cathode. So either in assembly, whether it be automated or manual, one of the most common mistakes that happens is mounting the component in reversal, whether it be any component. And LEDs are mostly the biggest problems that happens in such scenarios, especially if the marking is not understood by the assembly persons or the designers if they haven't included properly in the PCB. Now, this is another kind of LED. You can see here there is a marking, okay, and this marking is called a chamfer, so it indicates the cathode. And this is another kind of LED similar to this. We have a small square mark here. This is another kind of marking, and then underneath the LEDs, some of the LEDs have this kind of representation which indicates the cathode. So diode, the marking is towards the cathode. The only problem that we see is with the capacitors. And then again, simple, right? If you take this LED, the marking is towards the cathode side. So overall, if you see, the diodes are the easiest ones to identify, and the capacitors are little confusing based on different electrolytic, tantalum, axial, and the through-hole related polarity markings, which are different within the same capacitor parts. So these are some of them. We will discuss about more other polarities, common mistakes that are observed in the schematics, common problems that are seen in the designs in the upcoming videos. Thank you.